I won $23 million in the lottery and decided to keep it a secret until Thanksgiving, but a week before, my mom told me, "You have nothing to be thankful for this year. Stay away so you don't bring shame." A few days later, I posted a photo that made her regret every single word. Then my phone exploded 97 missed calls. My name is Dana Collins. I'm 31 years old, and for the last decade, my life has been a story written by other people. It starts, as these things sometimes do, at a gas station off I-71, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee, simmering hot dogs, and the faint, sharp scent of gasoline. I was on my way home from another 10-hour shift at my marketing job. A deep, grinding exhaustion settled into my bones that no amount of sleep seemed to touch. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store hummed overhead, making everything look sickly and pale. I just wanted a coffee, something hot and black to keep me awake for the last 20 minutes of my drive. As I stood at the counter, my eyes landed on the lottery ticket dispenser, a colorful roll of impossible dreams under a plastic cover. I rarely played, if ever. It always felt like a tax on people who couldn't do math. But that night, on a whim I still can't explain, I bought a single ticket along with my coffee. I tossed it into the glove compartment of my 7-year-old sedan without a second thought, where it sat forgotten among old napkins and expired insurance cards for 3 days. The moment it all changed didn't happen with a flash of light or a crash of thunder. It happened under the low, constant hum of the fluorescent lights in my office parking garage. A late spring rain was coming down hard, drumming a frantic rhythm on the concrete above, and I was just waiting for it to let up a little before heading home. To kill time, I started cleaning out my glove compartment, and my fingers brushed against the crisp edge of the lottery ticket. I pulled it out more out of boredom than anything else and looked up the winning numbers on my phone. The first number matched, my breath hitched, probably a coincidence. Then the second. My heart started a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. The third number matched, then the fourth. The world outside my car seemed to fade away. The rain, the humming lights, the scent of damp concrete, it all went quiet. By the time I saw the sixth number match, a profound and terrifying silence filled my head. It felt completely unreal, like a dream I couldn't trust, the kind where you know you're about to wake up. I checked the numbers again. And a third time, they didn't change. A lump sum payout that would clear to roughly $23 million after taxes. The number was so big it had no meaning, a string of zeros that my brain couldn't process. My first, immediate instinct was to call my mom. My hand was already on my phone, her contact pulled up, my thumb hovering over the call button, to share this impossible, life-shattering news, but something stopped me. A small, cold voice of caution I'd learned to listen to over the years, the one that always spoke up right before I was about to make a decision for someone else's benefit instead of my own. Instead of calling home, I typed lottery attorney into my phone's search bar. The first name that came up with stellar reviews was Marlene Shaw, a lottery attorney. I called her office and left a message. Marlene's first piece of advice, delivered in a calm, no-nonsense voice over the phone the next day, was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do: say nothing to anyone for at least 6 months. She explained that most sudden fortunes weren't lost to bad investments or lavish spending. They were lost to the outstretched hands of family and friends, to people who suddenly believed they were entitled to a piece of your life you never offered. Her words were a chilling premonition of a future I hadn't even considered. So I listened. I started living a double life. By day, I was the same Dana Collins. I drove the same car to the same marketing job. I lived in the same small, one-bedroom apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who fought too loudly. I packed my own lunch and complained about the price of gas. But in private, my evenings were spent becoming a student of my own future. Marlene, my new advisor, helped me set up trusts and a financial plan that was simple, solid, and completely invisible to the outside world. The money was moved into accounts that weren't connected to my regular bank, protected by layers of legal paperwork that she patiently explained in plain English. During those 6 months, I continued to give my family small amounts of money, just like I always had. It was a test, a quiet experiment. Mom would call, her voice laced with a heavy sigh as she mentioned a utility bill that was higher than expected. I'd send a few $100s. Instantly, the sigh would vanish, replaced by cheerful chatter about her garden or a new recipe she tried. It was a transaction, clean and simple, my money for her good mood. Kelsey, my younger sister, called a month later needing a few $1,000s for a deposit on a wedding venue. She was engaged to Trent Mason, her new fiancé, a guy she'd been with for all of 4 months who seemed to have a taste for things she couldn't afford. I sent the money, I watched them all with new eyes. Every request, every guilt trip, every disappointed sigh was no longer just a familial annoyance. It was data, evidence. I started keeping a ledger in a locked notebook. Not a record of my winnings, but a detailed account of all the money I'd already given them over the years. The total was a gut punch, $63,000. My plan had been to reveal the win at Thanksgiving. I imagined it as a grand, joyful surprise. I pictured their shock, then their tears of happiness for me, for us. I foolishly thought the money could finally fix our broken dynamic, that it would be a gift that would heal everything. I was so incredibly wrong. The call came a week before the holiday, shattering that naive fantasy. I was at my desk during my lunch break, scrolling through photos of a sleek, modern condo overlooking the river, a place I could now afford without a second thought. My phone buzzed and Mom's name flashed on the screen. I answered with a smile, ready to discuss what I could bring for dinner, but her voice had an edge to it, a cold, formal tone I knew all too well. It was the tone she used before delivering a verdict, usually about one of my life choices she found lacking. "Dana, your father and I have been talking," she said, skipping any greeting. "We don't think you should come for Thanksgiving this year." The words just hung in the air. I was sure I'd misheard her. My mind scrambled for a reason. Had I forgotten a birthday, said something wrong? "I'm sorry," I finally managed to say, my throat feeling tight. "It's just, Kelsey is bringing Trent's parents," she continued, her voice devoid of any warmth. "It's a very important dinner for her. They're a very put-together family and we want to make a good impression." I could hear the unspoken comparison hanging between us. "And what does that have to do with me?" I asked, my voice coming out flat and hollow. There was a short, sharp sigh on her end, the sound of a woman burdened by her disappointing child. "Well, honey, let's be honest, you don't have anyone, you'll be showing up alone again. You're not bringing anything to the table and it's frankly embarrassing," she said. The word embarrassing landed like a physical blow. Then she delivered the final, devastating line. "You have nothing to be thankful for and it just brings the whole mood down for everyone else." Nothing to be thankful for. For years, I'd been their safety net. I was the reliable daughter, the one who fixed things, the one who sent money, the one who never asked for anything in return. And now, because I was single and my life wasn't as shiny and new as my sister's, I was a social liability, a mood killer, an embarrassment. I didn't argue, I didn't yell or cry. All the fight just drained out of me, replaced by a cold, shocking clarity. "I understand," I said quietly. I hung up the phone, and in the sterile silence of my office cubicle, my plan for a joyful Thanksgiving reveal died a quiet death. A new plan began to form in its place, one that was colder, quieter, and entirely my own. On Thanksgiving morning, I didn't mope. I didn't sit in my apartment and feel sorry for myself. I got in my car, drove to the airport, and walked up to a ticket counter. I booked a first-class, last-minute ticket to a luxury resort in Hawaii that Marlene had mentioned was a favorite of her clients seeking privacy. The price was obscene, more than I used to make in a month, and I didn't even flinch. I spent the day lounging by an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the Pacific Ocean, a vibrant blue cocktail with a slice of pineapple in my hand. The drink alone cost more than my usual sad desk lunch. It was the first time in my entire adult life I had ever done something so impulsive, so completely and utterly for myself. The sun felt warm on my skin, and the sound of the gentle waves was a soothing balm on a wound that was still raw. That afternoon, I took a single photo. It was a selfie. I was wearing a new pair of sunglasses, and I was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. In the background, you could see the turquoise water, a pristine white sand beach, and the corner of the private cabana I had rented for the day. It wasn't a flashy picture. There was no stack of cash, no expensive jewelry, no obvious display of wealth. It was just me, looking happy, peaceful, and relaxed in a place I clearly couldn't have afforded a week ago. I posted it to my social media with a simple, carefully worded caption, "So much to be thankful for this year, here's to new beginnings." Then I tagged the location of the 5-star resort. I knew they'd see it. Kelsey followed my social media with an obsessive, critical eye. The post was a calculated move, a piece of bait dropped into the water. It was just enough to signal a drastic, positive change in my circumstances without revealing anything specific. It was a test, a way to see how they would react to my happiness when it wasn't connected to them, when it served them no purpose. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, ordered an expensive room service dinner, and sat on my balcony to watch the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen. I was nervous, but underneath it all, a thrill of control I hadn't felt in years was bubbling up. The game had changed, and for the first time, I was the one making the rules. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of exotic birds instead of my alarm clock. I let myself enjoy the quiet for a while before I picked up my phone and turned off the Do Not Disturb setting. The screen immediately lit up, buzzing and pinging relentlessly as a flood of notifications poured in. It was an avalanche. 97 missed calls, 38 from Mom, 29 from Kelsey, 12 from Dad. The rest were from a random assortment of aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't heard from in years, people who only called for weddings and funerals. My text messages were a chaotic, scrolling timeline of my family's collective meltdown. The first few messages from Mom were simple and confused. "Where are you? Call me." Then, as the hours passed with no response, they shifted to a tone of feigned concern. "Honey, is everything okay? We're all very worried about you." Kelsey's, of course, were far more direct. The first was just 3 words and a string of question marks. "Hawaii, how did you afford that?" Then the accusations began to fly, from Mom. "Are you in some kind of trouble? Did a man pay for this? You need to be honest with us, Dana. We can help you if you've gotten yourself into a mess." The implication was insulting. The only way I could be in a place like this was if I was in trouble or a man had bought my ticket. Kelsey's messages turned nasty. "Seriously, Dana, you go on a luxury vacation and you couldn't help me with the wedding caterer deposit. What is wrong with you? Some sister you are." Dad's were short and to the point, trying to be the gruff voice of reason. "Dana, call your mother, you're upsetting her." The messages painted a crystal clear picture. Their concern wasn't for me, but about what my unexplained good fortune meant for them. My happiness, existing completely outside of their control, was a threat, not something to celebrate. I pressed play on one of the dozens of voicemails. It was Mom, her voice a high-pitched, frantic whine I knew all too well. "Dana Marie Collins, you pick up this phone right now, you have some explaining to do. This is not acceptable behavior." I deleted it before she could finish her tirade. I didn't respond to a single text or a single call, I just let their panic echo in the silence. I stayed in Hawaii for the rest of the week, basking in the sun and the quiet. The silence from my end was a new kind of power, a weapon I had never realized I possessed. Every unanswered call, every text message left on read, shifted the dynamic that had governed my life for 31 years. I was no longer the one waiting by the phone, bracing for their next demand or hoping for a crumb of their approval. They were the ones left waiting, desperate for information, for an explanation, for access. Marlene had warned me this exact thing would happen. The moment they sniff money, even the possibility of it, they'll act like sharks that smell blood in the water, she'd said during one of our calls. Don't engage, let them show you who they are. And they were showing me with every frantic, demanding, and accusatory message. I spent my time hiking to waterfalls, reading books by the pool, and thinking. I grieved the family I wished I had, the one that would have seen my picture and texted, "That looks amazing, I'm so happy for you." I grieved for the mother who would have been thrilled by my good fortune, not suspicious of it. I slowly came to the stark realization that I had spent my entire adult life reacting to their needs, their dramas, their emergencies. My own wants and desires were buried so deep I could barely recognize them anymore. The constant barrage of calls and texts eventually slowed to a frustrated trickle, replaced by a tense, waiting silence. They knew I was back in Ohio. Kelsey probably saw my phone's location on some app, but they were waiting for me to make the next move, to come to them and explain myself. When I finally flew home, I felt like a different person. The old, familiar dread that used to live in the pit of my stomach was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. My first priority was security. I immediately moved the bulk of my winnings to a new national bank, one with no branches in my hometown, a place my family had no connection to. I started looking for a new apartment in a different county, an hour's drive away. I was building a fortress around my new life, brick by brick, and they had no idea how high the walls were about to get. I knew they wouldn't stay quiet for long. They were regrouping, planning their next move. The first real test of those new walls came in early January, right after the holidays. After 2 full weeks of radio silence, I decided to test the waters. It was a calculated risk. I went online and transferred a small amount of money, $500, to my mom's bank account. I attached a simple, infuriatingly vague note, "Just because." No explanation for Hawaii, no apology for my absence. It was pure bait. I wanted to see how they would interpret this small, unexplained gesture. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, my phone rang. It was Mom. I took a deep breath and answered. Her voice was syrupy sweet, a complete 180 from the angry, shrieking woman on the voicemail I had deleted. "Dana, honey, we were all so worried sick about you. That was so sweet of you, but you didn't have to do that," she cooed. It was her classic opener, the one that pretended to refuse a gift while fully expecting it. Predictably, she didn't ask where I'd been or where the money came from. She didn't ask if I was okay. Instead, she pivoted immediately to her own well-worn narrative of stress and struggle. "It's just been so stressful here," she began, her voice taking on a martyred tone. "With all of Kelsey's wedding planning, you know how it is. Everything is just so expensive these days." She was trying to re-establish the old dynamic, to pull me back into my designated role as the family therapist and, more importantly, the family ATM. My job was to listen to her problems and implicitly to solve them with my checkbook. But this time, I didn't play my part. I kept my answers short and non-committal. I see. Okay." I became a gray rock, offering her nothing to grab onto. She talked for 20 minutes straight, a monologue of complaints disguised as a conversation. The ridiculous cost of floral arrangements, the rudeness of the caterer, the stress that was giving her terrible headaches. It became painfully clear that the $500 wasn't seen as a gift. It was an opening bid in a negotiation I didn't know we were having. I let her talk, silently gathering more data. Her entire focus was on expenses. Money was the only language she was speaking. The call finally ended with her saying, "Well, we're just so glad you're back on track, honey." It wasn't a term of endearment. It was a warning, get back in line. A few days later, my phone rang again. This time it was Kelsey. She used the exact same syrupy sweet tone as Mom, and I knew instantly this was a coordinated attack. They had rehearsed this. "Dana, oh my God, I'm so glad Mom heard from you. I was starting to think you were abducted by aliens," she laughed, a little too loudly, a little too fake. She immediately launched into a breathless, overly enthusiastic description of her wedding plans. She talked about the lace on her dress, the historic charm of the venue she wanted, the specific shade of blush pink for the bridesmaid dresses. It was a performance. She was painting a picture of a perfect, beautiful life, the one I was now supposed to be funding. After 10 minutes of this monologue, she finally got to the point. So, she said, her voice dropping slightly, Trent and I were working on the budget last night and it's just, oh my God, it's so much more than we thought. She let out a long, dramatic sigh, a perfect echo of my mother's signature move. It was a learned manipulation passed down from one generation to the next. We were really hoping you could help out. I mean, it is your only sister's wedding after all, she said, her tone implying that this fact alone obligated me to finance the event. She didn't ask for a specific amount. She left it open-ended, a classic tactic designed to make me feel guilty and offer more than she would have dared to ask for directly. I stayed quiet, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. I could hear her breathing on the other end, waiting. Finally, I broke the silence. What exactly are you asking for, Kelsey? Her voice immediately turned brisk and businesslike, the sweet sister act dissolving. Well, Trent's parents are covering the rehearsal dinner. We thought you could handle the initial venue deposit and the caterer. It's only about $5,000. It wasn't a request, it was an assignment. She had already delegated a portion of her wedding budget to me. She was simply informing me of my duty. In the past, I would have caved. The weight of her expectation, the pressure to be the good daughter and the good sister, would have been too much. I would have felt the familiar churn of guilt, the deep-seated need to keep the peace at any cost, and I would have transferred the money within the hour. I would have justified it to myself, telling myself it was easier than fighting, that it was for my only sister's big day. But the woman who went to Hawaii, the woman who had listened to those 97 missed calls, was not the same woman on the phone with her sister. I took a slow, steadying breath. I'm not going to be able to do that, Kelsey, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The silence on the other end of the line was immediate, heavy, and hostile. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. What do you mean, you can't do that? She finally sputtered, her voice sharp with disbelief and anger. You just got back from a first-class trip to Hawaii, don't lie to me, Dana. We saw the pictures. The sweetness was completely gone now. This was the real Kelsey, the one who lived just beneath the surface, entitled, demanding, and furious when she didn't get her way. My finances are not up for discussion, I replied, my voice remaining calm and even. I would not let her pull me into a fight. The answer is no. Unbelievable, she hissed into the phone. You are the most selfish person I have ever met. After everything we've done for you, I almost let out a laugh. Everything they'd done for me, the ledger locked in my desk drawer told a very different story. I have to go, Kelsey, I said, my tone final. Fine, but don't come crawling back to us when your secret rich boyfriend dumps you, she shrieked, her voice cracking with rage before she slammed the phone down. I lowered my own phone slowly. My heart was pounding in my chest from the confrontation, but I wasn't sad. I didn't feel guilt. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a jolt of strength. I had drawn a line in the sand. I knew with absolute certainty that they would not respect it. This was just the beginning. The real escalation came 2 weeks later, late on a Tuesday night. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me out of a deep sleep. It was a call from Mom. I almost let it go, but a nagging feeling made me answer. Her voice was a choked, theatrical whisper, full of a manufactured panic I'd never heard from her before. It immediately set every nerve in my body on edge. Dana, oh Dana, I have something terrible to tell you, she started, already sobbing. My first thought was Dad. Was he in an accident? Did something happen to Kelsey? A cold, primal fear washed over me, eclipsing all my anger. What is it? What's wrong? I asked, sitting bolt upright in bed. It's me, she sobbed. I went to the doctor. They did some tests. She paused for dramatic effect, and I could hear her taking a shaky, deliberate breath. It's cancer, honey, stage 3. The doctors, they said it's very aggressive. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. For a moment, the world tilted on its axis. All my plans, all my anger, it all vanished, replaced by the terrifying image of my mother being sick, of losing her. She went on, her words tumbling over each other in a rushed, rehearsed speech. She named a specific type of cancer, one she'd clearly researched online to sound convincing. She talked about the aggressive treatment protocols, the debilitating side effects, the clinical trials, and the overwhelming, crushing costs. The insurance won't cover this new experimental treatment the doctor recommends, she whispered, her voice cracking with false despair. He said it's our only real hope. We need $30,000, Dana, just for the initial deposit to get me into the program. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. The terrifying diagnosis, the single glimmer of hope attached to a specific treatment, and the urgent, precise financial need. My mind was reeling. Part of me was horrified, ready to transfer the money without a second thought. But another part, the new, cynical part of me that had been forged in the fire of the last few months, felt a tiny, cold sliver of suspicion. The timing was just too perfect. I mumbled something about seeing what I could do and hung up the phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the end call button. I sat in the dark for a long time, the genuine shock warring with the ice-cold suspicion. Could my own mother lie about something like this? I thought about the years of smaller lies, the constant exaggerations, the way she could turn on the waterworks to get what she wanted, the way she manipulated every holiday into a referendum on her own happiness. I remembered the specific name of the clinic she'd mentioned. She'd said she was there just this morning to receive the devastating diagnosis from her oncologist. My heart pounded against my ribs as I looked up the number online. This felt like a terrible betrayal, even just to check, but I had to know. The truth, whatever it was the only thing that mattered now. I took a breath and dialed the main line. When the receptionist answered with a cheerful, professional voice, I kept my own voice as calm and steady as I could. "Hello, my name is Dana Collins. I'm calling for some information regarding a patient, Judith Collins. I'm her daughter and I'm listed as her emergency medical contact. I just need to confirm some details for her insurance paperwork." It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. The receptionist was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't give you any diagnostic information over the phone due to patient privacy laws." "I completely understand," I said quickly. "I'm not asking for a diagnosis. I just need to confirm that her appointment for an oncology consultation has been scheduled. There seems to be some confusion with the referral." There was a pause and the soft clicking of a keyboard on the other end of the line. "Let's see here, Judith Collins," the receptionist said. "Yes, I see she was here with us today for her annual physical with Dr. Evans, her doctor. Looks like we have her scheduled for a routine follow-up in 6 months." The words were flat, administrative, and utterly devastating. An annual physical, not an oncologist. A routine checkup. I thanked the receptionist in a voice that didn't sound like my own and hung up the phone. The shaking in my hands stopped. It was replaced by a profound, chilling coldness that spread through my entire body. She had lied. My mother had invented a life-threatening illness, a stage 3 cancer diagnosis, to try and extort $30,000 from me. Every last shred of doubt, every lingering sentimental feeling I might have had left for her, incinerated in that single, horrifying moment. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was a moral rot, a hollowness so deep and so profound that I couldn't begin to comprehend it. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. I called her back immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice ready to slip back into the role of the dying woman. "Dana," she whispered weakly. "I just called the clinic, Mom," I said. My voice was completely devoid of emotion. It was as flat and cold as a sheet of ice. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she frantically tried to calculate a new lie, a new escape route. I don't know what you're talking about," she finally stammered. "You had an annual physical with Dr. Evans. Your next appointment is in 6 months, I stated, not as a question but as a final, immovable fact. She started to cry, but this time the tears were different. They weren't the crocodile tears of her performance. They were tears of pure frustration of being caught in her own despicable trap. "The stress is killing me," she wailed, pivoting instantly to a new tactic. It feels like cancer, with Kelsey's wedding and you being so difficult and secretive, the pressure is making me sick. Can't you understand that? In her mind, she was still the victim. She was blaming me for the lie she had told. No, I said, it was the only word I needed. I hung up the phone. The bridge to my old life wasn't just burned. It was vaporized. There was no going back. After ending that call, I didn't feel the hot rage I expected. I felt clarity. It was like a camera lens that had been blurry for years suddenly snapping into perfect, sharp focus. The lie about cancer wasn't just another escalation in their campaign for my money, it was a definition. It defined in no uncertain terms who my mother was. It defined what my family had become. A transactional unit where love was conditional and morality was flexible. I walked over to my desk, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out the ledger. The one with the $63,000 figure at the bottom. I smoothed the pages out under my desk lamp. I had always seen that list as a sad accounting of my own weakness, a tally of all the times I had chosen their temporary comfort over my own long-term financial security. Now, looking at the neat columns of dates and amounts, I saw it differently. It wasn't a record of my foolishness. It was evidence. It was Exhibit A in the case I was building in my own mind, a case against the fiction of the loving family they pretended to be. In that moment of chilling clarity, I realized that simply saying no and keeping my distance wasn't going to be enough. That was a defensive strategy, and I had been on the defense my whole life. They would never stop. They would escalate, they would lie, they would chip away at my resolve forever because they operated from a profound, unshakable belief that they were entitled to me, my time, my energy, and now my money. The problem wasn't just their need, it was their belief in their right to my life. I had to do more than just build a wall. I had to hold up a mirror. I had to make them look at a true reflection of themselves without the flattering filters of guilt and obligation they always used. And I had to do it on my terms in a way they could never twist or deny. My goal was no longer just to escape, the goal was to confront. The next morning, the first call I made was to Marlene. I told her everything, my voice calm and methodical as I laid out the events of the past few months. The Thanksgiving call, the Hawaii photo, Kelsey's entitled demand for the wedding money, and finally, the fake cancer diagnosis. She was quiet for a long time after I finished, the only sound on the line the soft scratch of her pen on a notepad. "I've seen this before, Dana," she finally said, her voice grim and serious. "Maybe not a cancer lie, that's particularly monstrous, but this level of psychological manipulation is textbook when a large sum of money enters a dysfunctional family system." She told me that from her experience I had two fundamental choices. The disappear option or the confront option. The disappear option was the cleanest. It involved changing my name, moving to a different state, and working with her to create a labyrinth of legal entities that would make it almost impossible for them to find me or my assets. It was effective, but it felt like running away. It felt like they would win. The confront option, she explained, was much messier and far more dangerous emotionally. It meant facing them directly on their turf. "If you confront them," Marlene warned, her voice leaving no room for misunderstanding, "you have to be prepared for it to get ugly. They will lash out. They will try to destroy your reputation with anyone who will listen. They will paint you as the villain of this story." "They're already trying to do that," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "They're just doing it behind my back, to my face, everywhere. This would just be out in the open." I told her the idea that had been forming in my mind since I'd hung up on my mother. My plan was to let them stage the intervention they were no doubt already planning. To walk into their trap willingly but with a script of my own. Marlene was skeptical at first, her primary concern being my emotional and even physical safety. But as I laid out the strategy, I could hear the shift in her tone. "You'd be controlling the narrative," she mused, thinking it through. "You'd be using their own stage, their own weapons against them. It's a high-risk, high-reward move." We talked for over an hour, wargaming every possible outcome, every accusation they could throw at me, every tactic they might use. By the end of the call, we had a plan. It was risky, but it was also the only path I could see to real, lasting freedom. The new plan was brutally simple in its design. Step 1, I would stop saying no. In fact, I would stop saying anything at all. I would go completely silent again, cutting off all communication. I would let their frustration, their confusion, and their anger build to a boiling point. I would let them corner me. Step 2. When they inevitably demanded a face-to-face meeting, an intervention to deal with their difficult daughter, I would agree to it. I would accept their summons. Step 3, I would walk into their house, the very living room where I had been made to feel small and indebted my entire life, and I would listen. I would let them perform their designated parts: the wounded, crying mother, the disappointed, lecturing father, the victimized, long-suffering sister. I would absorb every accusation without a word of defense. And when they were finally done, when they had laid all their cards of manipulation and guilt on the table, I would lay down mine. I wouldn't just tell them about the money. I would show them the cost of our relationship to date. I would bring the ledger. I would read out every single dollar they had taken from me over the last decade, forcing them to confront the truth of their dependency. And only then, after I had established the long and sordid history of their greed, would I tell them about the $23 million. I would let them taste it for just a moment. I would let them see the future they thought they were about to have: the lake house, the dream wedding, the new cars, the life of ease. Then I would take it all away, permanently. It was an irreversible choice. This act would be the final word in our relationship. There would be no going back, no holiday cards, no awkward phone calls. The personal cost was immense. I was consciously choosing to formally orphan myself from my entire family. But the cost of not doing it, a lifetime of harassment, manipulation, and extortion, was infinitely higher. After I exposed Mom's lie and then went silent again, the family's strategy shifted from manipulation to brute force. The next call, a few days later, was from Dad. He rarely called me directly. He was the silent enforcer of the family, the one who backed up Mom's emotional plays with heavy sighs, stony silence, and looks of profound disappointment. His voice on the phone was thick with a manufactured sorrow, as if he were speaking at a funeral. "Dana, you've broken your mother's heart," he said, his opening line delivered with the weight of a judge's sentence. He didn't mention the cancer lie. He skipped right over it, acting as if it had never happened. This was their new, coordinated tactic: deny, ignore the facts, and pivot immediately to my supposed cruelty. "She was just stressed out," he said, clearly reading from the script Mom had written for him. "You know how she exaggerates when she's worried. You took it the wrong way." He then launched into a long, rambling speech about family, about loyalty, about all the sacrifices they had made for me when I was growing up. He brought up the time they co-signed for my first car, a 10-year-old Corolla with 150,000 miles on it. He framed it as a grand act of unparalleled generosity, not the standard thing a parent does to help their kid get to work. He even brought up my college tuition, to which they had contributed a few $1,000s my freshman year before I was forced to take on tens of thousands in loans to cover the rest. It was a pathetic attempt to build a case that I was deeply in their debt, that my current behavior was a shocking betrayal of their lifelong investment in me. "Family is supposed to help each other out no matter what," he said, his voice rising with theatrical indignation. "Your sister is getting married. This should be a happy time for all of us, and you're making it all about you." I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself, I just listened, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. Every self-serving word he said was just another piece of evidence, another line item in the case against them. 2 days after Dad's failed guilt trip, my phone buzzed with a text message from Kelsey. It wasn't words. It was a link to a real estate listing. I tapped on it and a slick virtual tour loaded. It was a brand new 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in a new suburban development, the kind with no trees and houses that were 5 feet apart. The price was listed at nearly $500,000. It was a palace compared to my small apartment. Underneath the link, a second text bubble appeared. Trent and I found our dream house. The down payment is $200,000. We know you can afford it. We'll pay you back someday. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. In the space of a few weeks, they had escalated from asking for $5,000 for a caterer to demanding a $200,000, six-figure down payment for a house. The phrase, "we'll pay you back someday," was so insulting it was almost laughable. It was the same empty promise she'd made about the $15,000 in credit card debt I'd paid off for her nearly a decade ago. This wasn't Kelsey's idea alone. I could feel Trent's influence all over it. The confidence, the specific high-end listing, the direct demand, it had his greedy fingerprints all over it. He was pushing her, telling her what she was owed, what was rightfully hers. I stared at the message, then locked my phone without replying. My silence was my answer. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Kelsey. I looked at her name, then placed the phone face down on the table and let it go to voicemail. The message she left was furious. "Are you seriously ignoring me right now? I sent you the house. This is the perfect opportunity for you to fix things after how you treated Mom. Trent says you're being incredibly selfish and that if you don't help us, you're not a real sister." She was no longer asking. She was threatening our relationship and using Trent as her authority. The demand was absurd, but it was designed to be. It was so outrageous that it was intended to force me to engage, to call them and argue, to be drawn back into their drama. It was all part of their plan to force a confrontation. Little did they know that was now my plan too. The email hit my inbox like a summons. The subject line said, "A family meeting," and it felt stiff and cold even before I opened it. It was from both my parents' account. That alone told me this wasn't a conversation, it was a ruling. I clicked it open and read. The tone was formal, clipped. I could hear Dad's voice in the short, sharp sentences and Mom's in the dramatic phrasing. They called my recent behavior erratic and my silence childish. They said my secret trip had upset the family dynamic and my hostility toward Kelsey had put a cloud over her engagement. Then the worst line. My disrespectful attitude toward Mom's health concerns. They treated the fake cancer like it was an uncomfortable rumor I'd started, not a lie she told. It went on. How I'd worried everyone, how I'd shunned the people who love me. The last paragraph wasn't a request. "We will be holding a family meeting at our house this Sunday at 2 p.m. You will be there. We are going to resolve this as a family." I read it twice. My jaw clenched. This was how they liked it, them in charge, me in the hot seat. They wanted me small, they wanted me scared enough to be obedient. I sat back in my chair and let the quiet of my new place wrap around me. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, the faraway sound of a siren drifting through the open window. It was almost peaceful. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have written 1,000 words in reply. I could have ripped their email apart line by line, but that would have given them the fight they wanted. I didn't owe them a debate. I owed myself a plan. I deleted the drafted reply, opened a new message, and typed one word. "Okay." I hit send and felt a small, solid click inside me like a lock turning. I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder with the printed ledger, the clean columns of dates and amounts. I smoothed the cover with my hand. Sunday at 2, they thought they were building a stage. They had no idea what I planned to set on it. The call came by accident the next day. My phone lit up with Kelsey's name and I answered without thinking. There was a muffled rustle like a purse scraping against a car seat, and then voices, hers and Trent's, poured into my ear. Pocket dial. I was about to hang up when I heard him. "Did she reply yet?" Trent's voice was sharp and annoyed, the kind of tone a teacher uses with a kid who keeps getting the answer wrong. "No, Trent, she's ignoring me," Kelsey said. When she wasn't performing, her voice went thin and whiny. "I don't think this is going to work." "Don't be weak," he snapped. I could picture him in that stiff collared shirt he wore to every family thing, the fake grown-up outfit. "It's your money as much as hers. Your parents said she's always been a pushover. You just have to apply more pressure." My mouth went dry. My chest felt tight like a small fist had closed around my heart. What if she says no at the meeting tomorrow? Kelsey asked, and there was a tremble in her voice I almost recognized from when we were little right before she cried to get me in trouble. I don't want to fight. I just want the house. She won't say no, he said, full of cold confidence. Not with all of us there. Your dad will lay it on thick and make her feel guilty. Your mom will cry. You talk about your dream house and how she's ruining your life. She'll fold. She always does. Always. The word hit me like a slap. What if she's got some secret man paying for stuff? Kelsey asked, and I could hear her chewing on a nail. Mom thinks, Trent laughed, short and mean. Who cares who's paying? It's leverage. Use it. There was a car door slam. The noise jolted through the line. Make sure you send that nice text, he added, voice lowering like a coach giving the last play. Be sweet, rope her in, we need her coming in soft. The call cut off. Silence filled my kitchen. The kettle on my stove began to hiss, then whistle, too loud for the tiny room. I turned off the flame and didn't pour the water. I just stood there with my hand on the handle and felt the last soft piece of me harden. I'd told myself for years that Kelsey was the way she was because Mom and Dad made her that way. Maybe that was true once, but she'd grown up. She'd made choices, and now she'd chosen a man who saw me as a bank vault to crack and coached her on how to do it. I set the kettle back. The metal clanged on the burner. I pressed my palm to the cool counter. Whatever thin thread of sympathy I'd been saving for my sister snapped cleanly. I wasn't looking at a lost kid anymore. I was looking at a partner in a scheme I never agreed to join. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a long text from Kelsey. The bubble stretched tall with paragraphs. I didn't open it right away. I made myself a cup of tea this time, sat at the kitchen table, and then I scrolled. Dana, I'm so worried about you. It started with that, a soft hook. I know we had a fight, but I miss you. I feel like you're pulling away from all of us. She sprinkled in childhood memories like sugar, how I pushed her on the swing, how we used to make blanket forts, how we'd whisper at night in the room we shared. I just want my big sister back. Then the turn, this new life you're living seems dangerous. That word again, dangerous, like me growing boundaries was a threat. Please just come tomorrow ready to talk, really talk. For me, if I hadn't heard the pocket dial, I might have felt that old tug in my chest. I might have thought she was reaching out with something real, but now I could hear Trent in the rhythms. The way the message never asked how I was, only asked for a version of me that served them. The way it softened me up for the blow, it was a speech written by a committee. I thought about replying. I typed, "We can talk tomorrow." I stared at it. My thumb hovered over send, then I deleted it. Another draft, "I'm fine." Delete. I locked my phone and set it face down. The tea cooled. A fly tapped at the window and then flew off. My apartment was quiet in a way I was still getting used to. There was no TV droning, no footsteps overhead, no dishwasher rattling, just the soft hum of the air vent and my own breathing. I slid the ledger folder out of my bag and opened it, running my eyes over the numbers I knew by heart. It calmed me. Numbers don't perform, they don't cry. They sit there and tell the truth until you're ready to hear it. Her text didn't need a reply, it needed a witness. I watched the bubble with those 3 moving dots appear and vanish a couple of times. She was waiting for me to fill the space. I let it stay empty. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling fan as it spun slow, pushing warm air around my dark room. I could smell the faint, clean scent of the laundry I'd folded earlier, the powder on my pillowcases, the soap from my shower. Every time I closed my eyes, the same scene played like a loop. My parents' living room, the sofa, the armchair, the careful way they would arrange themselves like a panel on a daytime show. I got up. I turned on a small lamp and padded barefoot to my desk. The folder lay where I'd left it. I added a sticky note on the first page, "Start in 2014. I printed a fresh copy of the totals and stapled it. I slipped the pages into clear sleeves so they wouldn't crumple. It wasn't about impressing them. It was about keeping my hands steady. My phone sat charging, the black screen reflecting a tiny version of my face. Earlier, Marlene had told me, simple and firm, record it. Put the phone in your pocket and hit record before you walk in. It's for your own protection." She didn't make it sound dramatic, just smart. Like bringing an umbrella when the sky's already dark. I practiced what I was going to say, not long speeches, just anchors. "Are you finished? Here's the total. I came into money, you'll get none of it." 4 stones in my pocket to hold when the floor felt like it might move. I chose clothes like armor, dark jeans, a plain sweater, calm shoes that didn't click on tile. I braided my hair back so I wouldn't fidget with it. I set my car keys in the folder by the front door. I checked my phone settings. 1 touch to start a voice memo, 1 touch to stop. There was a part of me that still wanted the other plan. Change my number again, pack a bag, drive until the signs turned into names I didn't recognize. Start fresh where no one knew how to say my last name. That path would have been quieter, cleaner, and it would have left this old ache inside me uncut like a splinter you learn to live with. They had dragged me into the light anyway. Their email was proof. They would hunt the soft version of me across the map. This had to end where it started, in their house, on their stage. I stood by the window and cracked it open. A cool breeze carried in the smell of wet pavement and distant cut grass. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and then again. I pressed my fingertips to the sill and watched a streetlight buzz to life. Dad would do the heavy sighs and the speeches. Mom would dab her eyes and say, "After everything." Kelsey would fling words like betrayal and selfish. Trent would stand there like a fixed post, arms crossed like he owned the air. They'd count on the old me walking in, the one who needed them more than they needed me. I wasn't walking in as their daughter or their buffer. I was walking in as a person with a bill of the past and a lock on her future. I slid the phone into my jacket pocket, felt the weight of it against my palm, and pictured the red line of a recording. My heartbeat thumped in my ears, loud and even. Tomorrow at 2, we'd end it. I turned off the lamp. The room went soft and dark, and I let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket I bought for myself, with my own money, in a home no one else had a key to. The drive to my parents' house felt like time travel I didn't ask for. I pulled out of my parking spot and the tires made that soft crunch on the grit near the curb. My hands were slick on the steering wheel, so I wiped them on my jeans and turned the air up 1 notch. The winter light was thin and gray, washing the town in a tired color that made everything look older. I took the same route I'd taken 1,000 times, past the little park where I'd scraped my knee so hard I thought I'd split in half. Dad had said, "Walk it off," and I did, biting my lip so I wouldn't cry. Past the movie theater where I'd given Kelsey my popcorn when she spilled hers because Mom said, "Make your sister feel better." The signs were the same. The cracked sidewalk outside the deli, the gas station with the lopsided price numbers. With each landmark, a memory rose up like a bubble and popped, and I kept my eyes on the road. My phone sat face down in the cup holder. The folder with the Ledger Road shotgun, its corner nudging my thigh every time I took a turn. I glanced at it at a stoplight and smoothed the edge of the cover. My mouth was so dry my tongue felt like paper. I wished for water and decided not to stop. If I paused for anything, I might not start again. I pulled onto their street and slowed. The houses were neat and small and proud, all the mailboxes standing in a row like soldiers. I parked a block away and let the engine tick as it cooled. My heart beat steady and hard like it had learned a new rhythm. For a second, I thought about turning around and driving until the highway swallowed me. I could smell my own fear, sharp and bright like metal. It didn't move me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. 1 tap, the red line on the recorder slid to the right. I slid it back into my pocket and pressed my hand against it to feel the weight. Then I picked up the folder, checked that the pages were tucked in tight, and rested it on my lap. "Are you finished? Here's the total. I came into money, you'll get none of it." I said those 4 lines in my head like a quiet prayer. I opened the car door. Cold air rushed in and lifted the hair at the back of my neck. I stepped out, shut the door, and locked it with a small beep that sounded too cheery for what I was about to do. The walk up the street was short and long at the same time. My boots made small sounds on the sidewalk. A wind chime tinkled on a neighbor's porch. At my parents' house, the lawn was trimmed in winter's flat green. A wreath hung on the door, fake berries bright as candy. Everything looked the same, and I felt completely different. I didn't even get my finger to the doorbell before the door swung open. Dad filled the frame like a bouncer. His mouth was a tight line, his eyes slid past my face to the folder in my arms, then back. "You're late," he said. I glanced at the time on my phone without pulling it out. I was 2 minutes early. I didn't bother to say it. I stepped inside and the smell hit me first, lemon cleaner and potpourri and something like cold gravy that had sunk into the carpet years ago. The house had the same staged warmth it always did, lamps on but not too bright, a scented candle lit on the hall table, family photos lined up on the mantel, the big frames for Kelsey's milestones. The air felt thick, the way it gets in a room right before a thunderstorm. They'd set it up like a scene. Mom sat in the middle of the sofa, her shoulders hunched just enough to look fragile. She held a tissue and pressed it to one eye, but it was bone dry. Kelsey was next to her, arms folded, mouth stuck in a pouch she'd been perfecting since middle school. Trent stood behind the sofa like a flagpole, arms crossed, chin lifted, his face arranged into serious concern. He looked at me like I was a problem to fix, or a slot machine about to pay out. The armchair across from them was empty, turned just so, like they had measured the angle. The accused's chair. I walked over and sat, setting the folder on my lap. The cushion dipped under me, familiar and gross. My phone was a quiet rectangle of warmth against my ribs. I placed my hands on the folder and felt the slick of the plastic sleeves beneath my fingertips. No one said hello, no "how are you?" The silence between us had shape and weight. Mom dabbed at her dry eye again and sighed, a long, trembling breath meant for an audience. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed and then clicked off. I felt the old little girl inside me sit up and reach, ready to apologize just to make this sick feeling stop. I looked at Mom's hard mouth under the wobbling lip. I looked at Kelsey's sulk. I looked at Trent's thin smile. The feeling passed. I stacked my hands one on top of the other and waited. If this was their stage, I would let them take their bow. Dad started like he always did, standing by the fireplace as if the bricks were a podium. He cleared his throat and paced 2 steps, the floor creaking under the same boards that had squeaked when I was 16 and sneaking a book past bedtime. "We're here because we are deeply concerned," he said, like he was reading from a prepared speech. His voice had that deep, serious tone he used when he wanted to sound like the only adult in the room. "Your behavior has been erratic, secretive, and deeply hurtful." He turned and nodded to Mom as if handing her the mic. She took it, tears arriving right on cue, her voice breaking just enough to carry. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Dana," she whimpered. "You're cold, you're cruel. After everything I've been through with my health," the word health hung there like a dare, I didn't reach for it. Kelsey leaned forward, her hands opening and closing on her knees. "You disappear, you go on secret vacations, you flaunt this whatever, and you won't even help me and Trent start our life together." Her voice climbed, sharp and bright. "It's my dream house, Dana. You're destroying my dream." She made dream into 3 syllables. Trent shifted his weight and stepped forward like a coach entering a huddle. "We're just trying to understand," he said, his voice smooth and reasonable like a commercial. "If you've come into some money, a real family would share that. They would want to lift everyone up, that's what families do." He pinned me with a steady gaze that was supposed to be kind. It bounced off. They took turns like a choir. Dad spoke about respect and how I didn't return calls. He dredged up old favors, the co-signed car, the small checks for college, laid them out like gold bars. Mom listed every time I'd disappointed her, from missing a church bake sale to that one Thanksgiving casserole I burned. Kelsey cried without tears about how hard wedding planning was, how every girl wants a fresh start in her own home, how I was standing in the way of happiness. Trent kept circling back to fairness, to family, to the idea that money is better when it's shared. 15 minutes stretched and piled. Words stacked like dirty dishes in a sink no one planned to empty. They called me selfish, ungrateful. A disappointment. They said I owed it to them to be transparent. They announced rules like I was still 20 and borrowing the car. I sat and let the words flow over me, then past me like water that didn't want me wet. My face was calm. Inside, the lines I'd chosen waited like pebbles in my pocket. Are you finished? Here's the total. I came into money, you'll get none of it. Dad's voice sputtered and stopped. Mom dabbed. Kelsey sucked in a breath like she was winding up for another pitch. Trent lifted a hand at his side to hush her without touching. The room went still. The clock ticked, the house settled a little, and it was my turn. Are you finished? I asked. My voice came out steady, not loud. It cut through the air clean as a knife. They all blinked like I'd snapped my fingers. Before anyone could answer, I opened the folder on my lap and slid out the first page. The plastic sleeve made a tiny squeak. I put the first sheet on top of the stack and held it where I could see and they could not. You've all talked a lot about what I owe you, I said, looking from one face to the next. So I thought it would be helpful to review the accounts. The word made Mom flinch. I didn't smile. Let's start with 2014, I said, reading the line I knew by heart. Kelsey, you needed $15,000 to clear your credit card debt after your spring break trip to Cancun. I took out a personal loan to cover that. Kelsey's face went blotchy. Trent looked at her, eyebrows lifting just a hair. In 2016, you totaled your car, I continued, my tone flat as a table. I gave you $7,000 for the down payment on the next one. I flipped the page. The paper made a soft slap. In 2017, rent shortfalls, 3 different months, 800, then 900, then 1,000. In 2018, I glanced up at my parents. The property tax bill came up short. I wrote a check for $2,300. Dad shifted his feet. The floor creaked again, the same note as before. He stared at the family photo over my head instead of my eyes. In 2019, Kelsey's boyfriend, I didn't say his name though it sat on my tongue, lost his job and needed a small bridge. I sent $2,500. He left 2 weeks later. I switched sheets. In 2020, Mom's dental work, $850. Mom's mouth opened and then shut. In 2021, the roof leak. I gave you $5,000. I kept going. Little amounts that had bled out of me like mosquito bites. $300 here for a utility bill, $400 there for a flight to visit a sick aunt I later learned wasn't dying, gifts that weren't gifts because they had strings tied to my neck. With each item, the air changed. The righteous anger sank into the couch cushions. Shame and an oily kind of stubbornness took its place. Kelsey stared at her hands. Trent's jaw rolled around like he was chewing something tough. Mom's tissue finally got damp. I turned the last page, neat columns, neat dates. Mom, Dad, I said, and I wasn't sure who I was looking at anymore. Over the years, I've given you money for a new water heater, for a broken washing machine, for another property tax gap you called a clerical error. I sent holiday money when I couldn't come home. I sent emergency money that never got paid back. I paused and looked down at the bottom of the sheet. The number sat there, heavy and simple, the way truth sometimes is. The grand total over the last 10 years of money I have given this family is $63,450. No one spoke. It was quiet enough to hear the small buzz of the candle by the hall. I lifted my gaze and let the number hang there between us like a drawbridge that had just lifted. So when you talk about what a family does about lifting everyone up, I said, my voice steady, almost gentle, I want to be very clear. I have been lifting and you have been taking. Now, you're right about one thing, I said, sliding the pages back into the folder and resting my palms on it. I did come into some money. All 3 of them leaned forward like I'd just opened a door to a room full of balloons. The discomfort on their faces vanished, replaced by a greedy, bright hunger. The air actually seemed to lift. 10 months ago, I won the lottery, I said. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Kelsey's jaw dropped. Dad's eyes widened and then shuddered like he was trying to look calm. Trent didn't even pretend. He straightened with a sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. How much? Trent asked, the words cutting across the room like a knife. After taxes, the lump sum was $23 million. The living room exploded. Mom's tears dried up in an instant, replaced by a shriek of joy. Oh, Dana, a lake house, we can finally get a place on the water. Your father can retire early, we'll host 4th of July. Can you imagine? She grabbed Dad's arm, already painting pictures in the air with her free hand. Kelsey gasped and bounced on the edge of the cushion. Oh my God, we can book the bigger venue. And the house, Dana, we can put in an offer tomorrow. We'll need new furniture and a fence for the yard, and Trent stepped into the fantasy with authority, his tone smooth and practiced. We should sit down with a financial advisor right away. It makes sense to set up a family plan so everyone is taken care of. It's smarter that way. They were spending it. In seconds, they were divvying my life into monthly allowances like houses and upgrades. They weren't even looking at me anymore. They were looking through me into the shiny world they thought I'd just gifted them. I let them talk for a long, quiet minute. I watched the glitter in their eyes as they reached for things that didn't belong to them. I counted to 10 in my head, twice, then I raised my hand. They all looked at me again, their faces open, expectant, hungry. I want to make something perfectly clear, I said, my voice as cold and even as the winter outside. None of you will ever see a single dollar of that money. Silence slammed into the room. The clock ticked. A car passed outside, a slow whoosh. Not for a wedding, I said. Not for a house, not for retirement, not for a car, not now. Not ever. Mom's mouth worked, opening and closing. No sound came out for a beat, then a high whine. You can't be serious. I am, I said. Kelsey made a sound I'd only ever heard when she stubbed her toe. You're a monster. Trent tried a different angle, his voice tight. You don't mean that, you're upset. Let's be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. This is me being more reasonable than I've ever been in this house. Dad took a step forward, the old anger burning through his calm mask. After all we've done, I stood up. The folder lay on the arm of the chair, neat and complete, the ledger on top like a final word. This meeting is over, our relationship is over. I walked toward the door. Mom let out a sound like a kettle just before it screams. Kelsey said my name like she was spitting it out. Trent muttered, "You'll regret this," and it sounded like a promise he was making to himself, not to me. I opened the front door, cold air slapped my cheeks. I stepped out and shut it behind me. The click of the latch was soft and final. I walked down the path, my heartbeat steady, my breath making little clouds in the gray light. At the curb, I hit the button on my key and my car answered with one small, cheerful chirp that felt like a laugh. The fallout came fast and loud, like a summer storm rolling over the house with no warning. My phone blew up the minute I pulled away from their street. I didn't pick up. When I got home, the calls kept coming. For 2 days, the screen lit up every few minutes. The texts came in waves, pleading, furious, dripping with guilt, soaked in insults. Kelsey sent one that said I was dead to her. An hour later, she sent another with a crying face and pleas for our family. We can work this out. Mom left 3 long messages, each one a different version of heartbreak. In one, she said she forgave me. In the next, she said I was ungrateful and sick. In the last, she begged for a chance to talk face to face, just her and me like we used to. We never used to. Dad kept it short and hard. Call your mother. We're not done. You will do the right thing. When I didn't answer, they tried a different door. Literally, my old landlord called to say a man who matched Dad's description was pounding on the apartment I'd moved out of weeks before, yelling my name so loud other tenants threatened to call the police. I thanked the landlord, apologized for the trouble, and hung up with my hands shaking. Then I called Marlene. I didn't need to explain. She already knew how this part went. First, she sent a letter that told them to stop contacting me. When that didn't slow them down, she filed the papers we'd talked about weeks earlier. A judge signed an order that told them to stay away from me, from where I lived, from where I worked. I changed my phone number that afternoon. The silence that followed was so deep it almost rang in my ears. I closed the door to my new condo 2 counties away and turned the deadbolt. The lock slid into place with a solid thunk. I walked into the kitchen and put my phone on the counter. No missed calls, no messages. For a while, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I kept bracing for the next crash that didn't come. But then the quiet started to feel like a blanket. It was heavy at first, strange. After a week, it felt soft. I could hear my own thoughts. I could sleep without waking up to a bad dream or a vibrating phone. I learned the little sounds of my place, the soft click of the heat, the hum of the fridge, the morning birds that gathered in the bare tree outside and scolded the dawn. Freedom wasn't a party. Freedom was the slow, steady exhale after years of holding my breath. I didn't celebrate with a splashy shopping spree. I didn't buy a sports car or a mansion. I kept my sedan. I bought myself a coffee maker that didn't splutter and a couch that didn't have someone else's dents in it. I slept on clean sheets and woke up without a knot between my shoulder blades. The real joy came from a different place. With Marlene's help, I set up a simple, quiet way to give money where it mattered. No big checks with my name on them, no photo ops. I wanted the opposite of my old life: no one grabbing, no one guilting, no one knowing. I sat with a scholarship coordinator at a community college and listened to her talk about students who worked night shifts and then took morning classes. Kids who were the first in their families to try for a degree, whose parents loved them but couldn't pay. I funded scholarships so those kids didn't have to choose between textbooks and rent. The school sent me a note, signed, a grateful campus, and a list of first names and majors. I read every line and cried anyway. A social worker at a hospital told me about families backed into a corner by bills that stacked up after a real illness. A kid with a broken arm that turned into missed work and late fees, a mom fighting lung disease who couldn't keep up with copays. We worked out a simple system. She sent me cases, I sent the money. She called me the kind stranger in her updates. I wasn't a stranger to myself. I felt more like me than I had in years. I met a woman named Tasha through a housing nonprofit. She had 2 little boys and a job at a daycare. She'd saved for months but kept getting turned away because the deposits were too high. I paid the deposit and the first month's rent on a small, clean apartment. Tasha sent a picture of the boys asleep in their bunk beds, their mouths slack, their hands tucked under their cheeks like babies. I put it on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Letters started to come in, forwarded through the foundation, addressed to a kind stranger. They were written on notebook paper and fancy cards and whatever someone could find at the bottom of a drawer. They were full of thank you that felt like air after a long swim. I'd sit on my new couch and read them out loud to myself. Sometimes I'd put my hand over my own heart like I could hold it steady through the swell. Through the grapevine, I heard that Kelsey and Trent didn't last long. Some cousin posted a picture from a bar and tagged Kelsey. No ring on her finger. Someone else mentioned that Trent had moved on fast and Kelsey was back in her old room at home fighting with Mom about laundry. I didn't gloat, I didn't clap, I just let the facts sit where they landed. My revenge wasn't a blaze, it was water poured on a fire I didn't start. It was me closing the tap on a pipe they'd hooked up without permission. It was quiet. It was living my life on purpose and lifting people who'd never ask for a lake house. About a year later, Marlene's assistant called to say there was a piece of mail for me at the office. I drove over on a Tuesday afternoon and took the envelope from the front desk. It was thick and looked weary by the time it found me. My name was on the front in Mom's looping script. I sat in my car and turned the envelope over in my hands. For a second, I thought about sliding it under the seat and driving away, but curiosity is a stubborn little thing. I opened it and unfolded 4 pages. It was the kind of letter that looks like an apology from far away. Up close, it wasn't. Mom was sorry for any misunderstandings. She was sorry I felt hurt. She wrote about how hard life had been lately, how Dad's retirement savings weren't enough, how Kelsey was struggling after a heartbreak. She used the word family 12 times. She didn't use the words I lied once. The last paragraph was the point. She eased into it like a car rolling through a stop sign. They needed just a small loan, she wrote. Just enough to help them get back on their feet. She promised it was temporary. She used my name at the start of the sentence and love, mom, at the end. I felt nothing, no sting, no rush of anger. It was like reading a weather report for a city I didn't live in anymore. I folded the pages back along their creases. I didn't tear them up. I slid the letter into the folder that still held the ledger and put the folder away where I kept old warranties and taxes. It belonged with records, not with memories. That night I made pasta with butter and garlic and a sprinkle of red pepper. I ate it on the couch with my bare feet tucked under me and a soft show murmuring from the television. The window was cracked an inch. The air smelled like rain. In the kitchen, the little light under the microwave made a warm square on the counter. My phone sat face down. It was quiet. My new normal wasn't a song from a movie. It was small and good. It was a life I chose. The cost was the family I was born into. The gain was everything else. When I turn the key in my door and feel the lock slide home, I think, this is mine. The door is closed. It stays closed. Money didn't fix my life. Boundaries did. The clean silence that followed was the cure I didn't know I needed. My family showed their true colors when money entered the room. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with people you love? Tell me what happened in the comments. If you want more stories like mine, hit subscribe and stick around.